Welcome to the Digital Manufacturer Podcast, your frontline source for all things digital transformation in manufacturing. I'm your host, Mark Flynn, and I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of manufacturing. In each episode, we'll uncover the stories of innovation that are defining the industry, offering insights and strategies that help to drive growth and efficiency. Join us as we speak to thought leaders and visionaries who share their journeys and the lessons they've learned along the way. So let's dive into today's episode and discover what the future holds for the digital manufacturer. Today, we're thrilled to welcome a guest who is redefining what it means to lead and innovate in manufacturing. Joining us today is Mark Greenhouse, a true pioneer in digital transformation within the manufacturing sector. Mark brings over 3 decades of experience at the forefront of operational excellence and leadership. As the driving force behind some of the most transformative initiatives in manufacturing, he's not just an expert, he's a visionary in helping companies to unlock the full potential of Industry 4.0. From scaling production through cutting-edge technology to optimizing teams for peak performance, Mark has seen and led it all. In this episode, we're going to dive into how digital transformation is reshaping the manufacturing landscape, the mindset and strategies that manufacturers need to stay ahead, and real-world insights from Mark's incredible career, including lessons that he has applied to every leader navigating today's fast-evolving industrial environment. So whether you're a manufacturing leader, a tech enthusiast, or someone fascinated by the intersection of people and technology, this episode is packed with value. Let's get started and explore how digital innovation can take manufacturing to the next level. Welcome to the Digital Manufacturer, Mr. Greenhouse.
Mark, you're very welcome to the Digital Manufacturer Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Fine, Mark.
Brilliant. Mark, look, I'm really delighted you agreed to come on the podcast. I mean, you're one of those individuals who I've been following on LinkedIn for some time, and you're obviously clearly an industry professional, well-versed in the manufacturing space, well-versed in lean, and you've a real passion for efficiency. And a lot of your content comes across as, being steeped in real-world expertise and, experience. So I wonder if you might just do a quick introduction for the listeners on you, yourself, your background, and the business you're running there today.
Yeah. Right. So it started a long time ago. We're talking 1987 when I first started talking about going into manufacturing, and I ended up doing a manufacturing management degree, which encompassed a sort of year out as well. But it ended up being more like 2 years I worked while I was at university for. First of all, making lawnmowers and then making lemonade in a factory that was well ahead of its time. We used to train Coca-Cola executives in how to run bottling plants. That's how far ahead it was. We had an unautomated warehouse. I fitted probably what was the first reverse osmosis, in fact, designed the first reverse osmosis water treatment plant of any volume in the UK. They were being used on ships, but not really on mainland. We had a 12,000 automated warehouse. It was just a great place to work. And from there, I went into working with teams in chilled foods. So really quick turnaround, really fast. I'd be buying products in the morning or raw materials in the morning, and they would have to be out in containers the following day. We were going through massive growth, and that was a lot of manual work. Processing vegetables, which is what we were basically doing, was pretty manual back then. And from there, I went on to be part of the team that ran the Walker's Quavers plant, which was the only place in the world where they made quavers. Learned a lot about making the right stuff in there and driving efficiency. And I'd done it in the other 2 places as well, and learned a lot from some really good teams and some really good challenges. Getting stuff out that's going to a warehouse like Quavers is not quite as difficult as getting stuff out that's got to be in a shop the following day and sold, and has got all kinds of controls with it. And from there, went to FMCG, to Boots, and ran departments making shower gels and shampoos and conditioners and toothpaste and everything. I used to have a strapline was that anything you've eaten, drunk, or washed in is I've made. So that's kind of part of it. Every supermarket had something that I'd made and sold on. And then I got into the understanding the customer part of improvement, which is really kind of where people say it starts. And what I realized fairly quickly is that most lean people never start there. And then actually most marketeers don't always start there as well with understanding the customer. Had some really good wins in that. Took one business from 2 million customers to 6 million in just over 3 years. So it spent 20 years getting to 2 million customers and took another 3 years to get it to 6 million. And we also increased the value of what we were selling to the customers as well, quite dramatically. We went from £10 a policy to £26 a policy. And the business, when I arrived, was having this internal dilemma of going from 10 to 12. And a few of us was out there going, no, we can go much higher than that. And then I came back into manufacturing. And I've worked with a whole range of businesses, still some in food and drink, some in heavy engineering. So I worked on building monopiles, which are the big white, I call them lollipops, big white lollipops that the wind turbine blades go on. Building them up on the banks of the Tees in, I think about 2011. And building some very high-speed printing machinery and labeling kit and beer mats, farm equipment. You know me. I've done kind of everything from really heavy fabrication, 100 mil thick steel, which is you don't even get that on the ships these days. You don't. The ship that got stuck in the middle of the Suez and blocked everything probably had a hull that was only 60 mil thick. The monopiles are 100 mil thick pieces, so quite different engineering techniques, right the way through to again shampoos and filling bottles and double glazing and things like that. Anything that's got manufacturing involved is where I am, and I've been a shift manager, operations director, project engineer. So I've kind of done a lot of different roles within that and built a lot of things. So that's me.
Unreal experience. Unreal. And in that 40 years, what really stands out for you in terms of what successful manufacturing companies are doing well versus folks that are dragging behind?
There's a couple of things. The first one is that the best companies have data and they use it. I see a lot of companies where there is no data collected, there is no challenge. And if you don't have data, you can't have a plan. And if you can't plan, you can't schedule. And there's a vast difference between those two activities. And I'm passionate about scheduling. I've made some of my biggest improvements purely by dealing with scheduling and what we call level loading in factories. Because a lot of places can't do it. So you can't do the level loading because of the activities they're undertaking. You might have a guy doing a piece of welding, which is, it's 5 hours. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't split it down and give two guys 2.5 hours each. It's one piece of welding for 5 hours. But understanding how that impacts your schedule is really important. Without data, you can't do it. And I see far and away too many businesses today either don't have the data or they have it and they don't look at it, they don't use it. And I've got my own views on why that is. But that's the biggie for me, because you then can't plan. You can't say, what am I going to make today? And every business can do that. Every manufacturing business can say, what am I going to do today? What am I going to start? What am I going to finish? And if you don't have data, you can't do it. You can't work out and you end up kind of drifting. And then you can't have standard processes. So, you can't have periods when you might have a quiet week and you might be sat there. If you've got the data, well, we've only got enough work till Thursday. Actually, do we want to do it all Monday to Thursday and do some training on Friday, some catch up on something? Or do we want to do Monday, Tuesday, really normal, Wednesday, do the training or the work with somebody, and then finish it Thursday, Friday? We can't have those discussions because we don't have the data. I'd I reckon sort of as you come down the hierarchy of businesses in terms of size, I think the lack of data is the smaller companies don't have it. The mid to larger companies don't always use it, even if they've got it.
So I was just going to say that the big companies that are, moving forward, generating consistent profits year over year, generating consistent growth year after year, are using that data in every shape, every form on an everyday basis. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah. Whether they're using it they're using it every day for planning and scheduling. They're understanding where it impacts an improvement. They're using it to go into to look for improvements. It's not the only thing they'll use, but it'll give you some big clues and it'll give you some hard evidence to work off. So you might not use it every day when you're in improvement, but you certainly would in planning and scheduling, and you understand the impact it can have. But even in large organizations, I see people not able to either access the data, they haven't got access to it, or they don't know it's there, or when they do get it, they don't know how to then interpret it. And that's a big thing for organizations at the moment. And I
absolutely
genuinely don't see it getting any better.
In the experiences we've had, certainly with a number of our manufacturers, ranging from like small, 1 mil, 2 mil, 10-person outfits, all the way up to, that top end of the SMB scale of kind of 300, 400 million type turnover. There's various reasons why they're not using it. I think at the smaller scale, there's that concept of time, right? I don't have enough time to look at the data because I'm so busy making sure that we're fulfilling customer orders, we're getting stuff dispatched. And you did a great post. I really enjoyed it around this concept of busy time and how you're filling up your week and you're making sure that your factory has 40 hours or whatever it is of production per week. But actually, if you took a step back, you could probably increase efficiency, increase profitability by doing the same load in 30 hours and spending 10 hours, doing operational excellence or, reviewing the data or training your team, which I thought was really interesting. So, that was a clear indication for me that at the lower scale, maybe people should slow down to speed up a little bit and think about how they can put in place a simple reporting structure that allows them to get access to their data, that helps them to understand how effective their production operations are being, and look to then drive the business from that data. Because I think the other thing too is people think, I get access to data or information and I stop there. I get the answer there and I go and do something about it and I never look at it again. And that's not the way not the way to think about it. You should be using it to drive incremental change, right?
Yeah. If you've interrogated a database to make a report, you should be running that report regularly. I used to run a database team investigating reports for people, and it always drove me mad that I'd get a request for a certain piece of reporting, and it would go out, and you go, right, do you want it again next month? No, I don't want it. But you must want it to check again to see whether what you've done has improved things or made it worse, or. But you'd often get, no, I only need it this once. So that was kind of something I saw in people's behaviour with data. I think the problem we often have as well, and this is a problem that's kind of why I say it's not necessarily just a small organisation piece. It's not just an SMB. It's a larger piece. Is people struggle with calculations. So when I'm talking to them about starting a piece of work at 9 o'clock in the morning and the rate of the machine is going to be 300 an hour and I need 750 pieces, when's it going to finish? That concept of multiple calculations often is beyond people. They struggle with it. That's not unusual because when you understand numeracy, which is slightly different to knowing about maths and learning the stuff you do at school, numeracy across kind of Western world about just over 50% of people wouldn't be able to do that calculation. Now, when you're looking at improvements and things like that, you've got often when you're looking at a process, you've got multiple things that you've got to look at that move along and shift and impact on one another. And you might have multiple lines that are impacting across each other. So it's kind of a skill that people either have or haven't got. And what you've got to do as a manager is, if you find that people haven't got it, is make it clear to them how to do it. You've got to make the calculations clear to people. And we're probably not always great at doing that, really. But that's the challenge for organisations, is to get the right people interpreting the data, and then giving people the story of what the data says to other people, who can then go out and once they get it, they get it. I've seen that happen lots of times.
I think there's a couple of points that you made there that I just want to come back to. I mean, the first around folks not knowing how to do the calculations or interpret the data is a couple of reasons why I think some of the larger organizations fail to really leverage the investment they've made in collecting data and extracting information, because there's a training element there around how to interpret the information that is being returned to you, or how to make use of the data that's been collected in a meaningful way, and also in a manufacturing process way. It needs to be part of the story, or be given context in order to deliver real value to the business, which is something you mentioned as well. Because some of the times we see people report like sales figures or product margin or OEE or whatever it might be, but individually it doesn't really make any sense. But when you put it into the broader context of what's going on in the business, in terms of we had a breakdown on that line, or that line was in for maintenance, or we had to do a last minute changeover because there was a last minute order that came in, or whatever it is, without that context, the data doesn't mean anything. And I think that's what people need to think about and begin to train their teams on from the bottom up, right? I mean, everyone has to have an appreciation of where are the KPIs, where are the data collection points, what is the overall story for their factory when it comes to increasing efficiency and making use of the data.
Yes, absolutely. It does.
So data's a big piece. So what else have you seen in that kind of extensive experience that you've had, in terms of what great businesses are doing well and what others can learn from?
Okay, the other things that businesses do really well. The one thing that I'm seeing more and more of, or not seeing more and more of, depends how you view it, is outsourcing. So the really good companies have learned where to outsource activities and where not to outsource. And really good companies who are selling outsourcing activities have learned how to get their message across about how they can impact the business. So, the best companies know, right, we've looked at this activity. It's not our core capability. But you know what? That Monday morning when we started 20, 30 years ago, we didn't know anything else. We only wanted to make one unit. So we did it all ourselves. And we've grown and grown and grown, but our core activity is over here. And this bit we kind of do. So I've found companies doing all their own wiring, doing all their own piping, doing all their own literature printing and things. You could take that out and release the person who's doing it to make something else. It wouldn't be a problem. And I think some of the outsourcing companies failed. They'll talk about what they can do, but what they fail to talk about are all the things that they do for companies. So very few of them talk about total cost of ownership. So if I can buy a kit of components that have already been, either a kit of components that have been put in a box for me, or a kit that's actually made up, if I've only got one supplier, if I've only got one location to go to, if I've kind of got it and then that's on my unit, whatever it is I'm making, the total cost of ownership's really low. If that's got 30 different pieces in. I've got to order them in. I've got to store them. I've got to pay invoices off them. I've got to keep an eye on the stock levels. And then I've got to make it. My total cost of ownership is quite different. And some of the outsourcers are not great at making that obvious to people. So I think the best companies know when to outsource activity and when to insource it. And that's one of the big differentials, because that allows you to free up people to do other things. It tends to get you a lower cost. I mean, it should get you a lower cost. It certainly should get you a better quality. And in the challenges with people and all those things that are going on these days with people with skills and that, it's not a problem. And one of the big things that I posted earlier this week was about some guys at the London School of Economics have done some research on productivity gains. And the car industry in the UK, a car industry worker in the UK in 2018, 2018, has 12 times the productivity level of one in 1980. In general manufacturing, that figure is only 4 times the productivity level. So there's a disconnect between manufacturing, car manufacturing, and the rest of manufacturing. And they've put it down to some of that is to do with the use of automation and then the use of outsourcing, because the car industry has kind of done that. We have got more assembly plants. If you went to Longbridge years ago, they'd have had a press shop, and they'd have had a seat shop, and they'd have had somewhere else making the springs, and they'd have had a lot of things there. But what they've done since 1980 is slowly given those out to other businesses and become more of an assembly plant. So I think sometimes there's too much. We want to try and do everything. I get it. That's how you started out. But at certain points, you've got to look at it and go, actually, is this the right thing for us to be doing? Will outsourcing get us somewhere else? And release some of our staff to do the stuff that we're good at and the stuff that we're meant to be the best at. So that's the other big thing that I think businesses have got to sort of cast an eye across what they're doing. Are we the right people to be doing this? And you can. There are some tips you can use. I will get my clients to put bids out to people, and we'll do it with all material supplied and with no material supplied. And what you'll get is actually the outsourcers can buy the material cheaper than you anyway, because they're buying vast quantities of it. So they're already buying cheaper. They've got the right equipment to be able to do it. Therefore, they're normally much faster as well in how to do it. So it's kind of like, it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense in the context of that's where the business came from.
I think that's a good point. I mean, the outsourcing angle, there are two very distinct camps, isn't there, around whether you're kind of pro outsourcing or whether you think of outsourcing as the devil almost and stealing jobs away. But to your point, though, used effectively, it's going to drive growth, and it's going to keep your individual workforce focused on what makes you unique, and not have, I suppose, commodity activities being delivered from your business that can be delivered elsewhere with an economy of scale, as you've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, look. Normally, people fear outsourcing and think it's going to be, it means getting something from a cheaper labour rate. Actually, if there's a company down the road from you that make those units, then they're going to be cheaper than you at making it, and they're going to be faster than you. And actually, it's the time that you then take out of your business that allows you to do the things you want to do. So if you're in a growth phase, looking at outsourcing is there, and it's not about sending it to China or India or anything like that. It's about looking. You start in the UK. You will probably find people. And it's when you think about the total cost of ownership, that's the big, again, you're back to understanding the data about what it costs you to actually do something. We've all done it. You get asked to put a shelf up and you're like, oh, it'll take me 10 minutes. And it's 10 minutes to find the drill and 10 minutes to find the bits that go with it. And then it's, I need... I need to get my ruler out, and I need to start measuring, and I need a pencil. And by the time you've done it, 90 minutes have gone. Because you're not set up to do it. And that's what happens without, it's that total cost of ownership that's the biggie for businesses, I think. So it doesn't need to be out in China or India. It can be your local supplier. It can be somebody, it can easily be somebody in the UK.
I love that. And also, I mean, partnerships would be one of Rubik's key values. And I love seeing our client companies with, you know, the sauce for this is made down the road. You know, the packaging is made down the road. The film is made here. And it's, you know, it tends to be a cluster of family businesses in and around the same region. And then they come together to export internationally. Actually, I'm reminded of, we have a joinery client that's working with another group of joinery clients that are all making different types of wood-based product. And they are exporting together to the US as a concerted effort to try and disrupt that market. And everyone is doing their little bit of the product development that they are unique for. And, you know, it's not being outsourced outside of UK or Ireland. It's being outsourced within, you know, County Limerick is the one I'm thinking of, which is great to see, right? It's co-working at its finest.
Yes. Yeah.
What else have you seen? So use of data, outsourcing, or building strong partnerships, or focusing on what you are good at, what makes your team unique. What else have you seen that kind of shifts the dial when it comes to being good to great?
It's understanding the kind of layers of change that you've got to go through. You know, we get a lot of people. I view it in 3 layers. So there's 3 layers of change, and we often approach things in a single layer. And I'm having a chat with an organisation right now, and they've recognised this, that the 3 layers are disconnected. So you've got a process layer, which is often where continuous improvement people come in and they look at the manufacturing bit and they look at the processes on the shop floor. But invariably, what happens in a lot of plants is there is data flying around and it's going to a digital layer here. Even if it's, you've got a works order that follows a piece of work around, at some point that works order has got to be input into the MRP or ERP or CRM systems, or all 3. It's got to be there. And then above that is, so you've got a process layer, you've got a digital information layer, and above that you've got a management or behavior layer. And the key to that is that every step of a process is managed by somebody, whether that's hourly by the operators and the supervisors on the shop floor, whether it's daily by the management team that are there, or whether it's, you know, at the end of the quarter when the CFO goes through the results and he's got a report in front of him. And invariably, they're kind of, you know, at the management layer, they've got this set of reports that they look at that looks at various steps or various points on the steps, but doesn't have a view of everything. So the best organizations are recognizing this, that actually, if you want to change the process, you've got to remember to look at that digital information layer and see if that needs to alter and change. And the top layer needs to sort of take a look at itself and decide if it's doing the right things. And I think the example I use with people is that, you know, take PCs and computers out of it and everything. In June 1913, Henry Ford set about trying to work out how to make his cars faster. So how do I make a car faster? He spent weekends over the next 6 months trying out different ideas. It didn't come to him one night and he got it straight away. He looked at different ideas. By early 1914, he'd got it. That was the start of the production line. There's some debate whether a production line was first invented in MG Motors in the UK, but by the by, probably Henry Ford didn't have that information in front of him. But he went from...
No internet.
Yeah, no internet, no computers, no nothing. So he's making the same car. It's the same nuts, same bolts, same wooden wheels, same solid tires, same horsehair-filled leather seats. Everything is kind of the same, apart from it went from 12 and a half hours per car to 90 minutes per car. So it's the same material, same bolts, same nuts. It was a different management thinking. And that's what I think the best organizations do. The management are prepared to try something different. It's not just about the process at the bottom that's got to change. It's how I manage it and what I'm seeing in front of me. Am I prepared to try something new? People talk about kind of Henry Ford and Toyota, and it's almost as if it was done overnight. I did a post the other day about the inside of one of Taiichi Ono's books, which has all the timelines about how long things took and the things that they abandoned along the way. Some stuff took 14, 15 years to get right in that company. It wasn't overnight. And there's stuff in the book where there's a cross against it and we abandoned this. But it was management thinking. It wasn't new technology. It wasn't anything more radical than that. It was management saying, actually, we've got to control this in a different way. We've got to control this process down here and think about it in a different way. So I think the best businesses do that. They're open to new ideas and new thoughts, and looking at things from a different perspective. That's
such a good point.
The biggie for me.
Yeah, such a good point, Mark. I mean, we talk about this concept of digital leadership when it comes to making sure that you're going to get a great return on your digital investment. And everyone asks, I think even in your report that you sent through, you kind of quoted a shocking stat from Forbes, which was around 78% of all digital transformations or digital projects fail. And in our experience, the number one reason for that is if there's a lack of digital leadership. And we talk about digital leadership being a couple of things. The first is, and you said it at the head of the call as well, you got to have a plan, right? You got to know, at least at a high level, what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, where you're going and how you're going to do it. Without that, you're going to fail. But complementary to that, we talk about, having total ownership. So you need to have an empowered stakeholder who is going to own that project or that initiative end to end. And that individual needs to have the courage to try, the courage to fail, and the courage to keep going, because it is an iterative process. All the good companies, all the great projects that we've been on have delivered their digital projects in a iterative fashion and have been prepared to fail and try again. And they build from the bottom up.
Yeah.
And the thing that frustrates me at times, and I'm interested to know whether you share this frustration, is that's how manufacturers develop their products. But when it comes to doing digital, they think differently. They think it has to be a big bang. And I'm kind of like, no, apply a manufacturing process to how you're going to do digital. It's you literally are manufacturing digital from the bottom up. So you know how to do this. It shouldn't be complex. Do not be afraid of it.
Yeah. It is an interesting one, the sort of digital, because I think part of it is people are frightened of it. It's kind of, it fixes what you do, and therefore it makes them frightened. And it can sometimes look like it's not flexible. But I think businesses need to take that on board and say, right, well, where is the bit where we don't want to be flexible? Where is the stuff where we can't be flexible? There's certain parts of a business where you can't be flexible. Orders that you're taking in that don't meet what you make, you can't be flexible. If you're making a product that has a set parameter, you can't be changing that around. If you're design led, you can be, but if you're not, if you're just this is our product offering, you can adopt some of the processes a bit quicker. And sometimes it's kind of having the ability to say, well, this product can go through a digitized route, this one can't, well, we'll stick with what we've got on that. We can at least digitize this route for these products, and we can start to separate them. Because most businesses I look at as well are not, that they're different types. So they have different types of product going through, some of which can be pure one-offs. They can be very bespoke, or they can be repeated very infrequently. And other ones, they're making them every month. So you're kind of like, well, that would be a product to put through a digitization process. So I think it's that kind of companies are afraid of. And you're right, they're afraid to try new things. Most of the best engineers I've worked with have tried stuff. You get something in, you get a piece of kit in, and you try it, and you see what the effect is. You go and see machine trials. You go and try it doesn't matter what any machine manufacturer will tell you about how good their CNC lathe is or their mill is. You as an engineer will want to put your material and your tool in on that machine and test it before you purchase it. That's a given. You don't want to risk it and it go wrong. And you'll want to put a number of iterations in. And I think you're right. I think it's probably a software problem more than a digital problem, is that people think big bang. And that's not, I don't think that's a manufacturing issue either. I think that's probably a wider sort of business issue. People think you've got to come in on a Monday and everything's done, whereas actually you build upon it. So, you have building blocks that you develop on your journey to it. You don't suddenly put robotics in. You don't suddenly put lean in or improvement in an entire factory. I work with some large businesses. I don't do it in an entire business in one go. We choose one site and we do it. We'll choose one group in there and we do it. So it's the same there. It's kind of breaking improvement down into small digestible chunks and doing that with it. Because the other reason is you want to create little fires of improvement, and that's probably the same with digital projects. Little fires of, this works. Can you see how it might work? You might not be able to copy it. It might not be copy and paste, but it might be, right, this worked here. How do we, can it work across there? What's the issues with it? I suppose the thing with digital that frightens people is that because they think it's big bang, they also think it's irreversible. And that's the risk for them that they see. And it's, like I say, it's kind of, it's that irreversibility that's probably a bit of an issue for some people. But if you're building small building blocks, it's not irreversible, and it's not a problem because you haven't gone big bang.
Oh no, absolutely. I think people are naturally afraid of the unknown. So the more that you can kind of warm them up to that, the small incremental change, the easier it is for overall. The other good point I think you made was just around, not everything has to go through the digital process. I mean, there's always going to be an element of where any system that you put in does not cater for what happens in everyday life. And you've got to be
absolutely.
You got to be cognizant of that, and you got to be flexible to work around that. And that type of thinking is also going to save you money in any sort of digital implementation, because often we find that our customers get hung up on the very edge case scenarios that happen once in a blue moon, and you end up spending a huge amount of money trying to configure a system to deal with that edge case scenario, where the bigger organizations that we've worked with, they will say, actually, we will just deal with that when it comes up. We just want a standard system that takes care of 80% of our volume year in, year out.
Yeah.
The other 20% we will work through when it happens.
Yeah. I've seen some companies recently, and they bring in so order processing, a really straightforward, really important part of a business. And they get emails, they'll get order forms, they'll get not necessarily text messages, but they'll get it in different formats, and they're working on a system whereby they can take the information that comes in and transfer it onto their own system as an order. and they've got to about 70% where they can do it. And it's like, right, why don't you just stop? Because you're kind of not going to get much further than that. And the other bit, you still have to do manually that you've always done. And until the technology and you can work it out how to do it, and maybe sometimes you've got to go back to somebody and say, look, can you give us this bit of information when you fire this back in? Because that will really help us. And maybe that figure will go up if you do that. But right now, you've kind of got stuck at 70%. But that's great because that's 70% less work that somebody has to do on orders. They can just carry on with that. And it's this idea that not everything, and it's the same with sometimes when you're looking at robotics in an organization, they might want to do, particularly smaller guys, I want to be able to do everything through it. Well, actually, no, do the bits that you can do through it. And the bits that you can't, just go, you've got welders here to do it. They can be setting that up to do the stuff. And then in the time that they would have been doing the stuff that's now going through the robot, they can do the other stuff. So you are going to get a benefit. You're not going to get this vision of everything being automated and seamlessly through a plant. You've got to step in, and knowing when to step in is key.
Mark, what's your view on robotics and IoT and Industry 4.0 and AI, all that kind of advanced stuff that is I was going to say coming down the line, but it's not. Right? It's here. Is that only reserved for the big companies, or like is there, in your experience, is there ways and means that kind of mid-sized and smaller manufacturers can be making use of some of that technology?
I certainly think some of the smaller guys have to make use of the technology, but whether it's the challenges are kind of different in different parts of the business. So in the sales process, the challenge may come that salespeople have been quite happy to accept everything that a customer wants, and a business might want to invest in an AI solution, which is kind of a system which designs what you want. So the customer puts in what they want, they make some selections, and the system goes off and designs it and says, right, you want this system, you want these bits, you want that bit, and knows when they can't go together. Now, sales may not necessarily like that as a process, but that's what often a salesman's doing in an engineering business, is trying to configure what the customer wants. So I think configuration software is probably a big one for sales teams to look at, and then organizations to look at as to how the configurator would work and how it would work through their systems. And that kind of extracts knowledge. You can't put unit A with unit B when you want it of a certain size. It doesn't work. You've got to do something else. So that'll come for them. And I think when it comes to robotics, it's kind of, there's a phrase we use, which is, so there's automation where the robot does absolutely everything, and there's automation where the robot helps the individual. And I think that's kind of where cobots sit. And I think there's a lot of potential benefit with things like cobots. That to me is where a lot of organizations can start to look at it, and taking out repetitive work from people. So, we've got an aging workforce. It's not going to go away. We probably want people to be able to work longer if they can. And one of the big things that we can do is take that, take the physical effort out of work. Robots or automated solutions are great at doing that. I think that, to put it into context, the worst I've seen when I calculated it, so I was watching a guy doing a piece of work, looking at how a machine worked and how he operated with it. And within literally 20, 30 minutes of watching him and going through everything and going through cycles, I worked out that one guy would lift something out of that machine over 320,000 times a year. Wow. And he was bent over it, right? And he was 6'2", and he was bent too far. And the next guy coming on, believe it or not, 5'7". So he was struggling to reach in because they had a standard step. And you're there thinking, A, we need to sort this out quickly to allow for different heights, but B, Why are we letting somebody lift something out of a machine 320,000 times a year? That can't be good for the physical body. So we've got to get that done. And I think there's things we can do to make work easier, and there's things where the robots can do. Cobots these days, when I look at them, they're almost point and click. So if you have got standard work that you can put through, standard parts that you make regularly, that's where they're great at doing it. And people worry about what will come along for the staff in those situations. But if you've got other stuff coming through, the kind of bigger stuff, or the stuff that's unique, or the thing that's one-off every now and again, that's the stuff they want to be doing. They don't want to be stood there doing the same stuff hour after hour after hour.
Yeah.
So there's that to it. So I think businesses have got a number of challenges to be able to break work down and go, actually, where can we just make this easier? And my tip there is always start with the stuff you do loads of, either physically moving or physically producing a load of units, and go and look with that and see what happens.
Yeah. I did hear a rumor, and I'm not in the insurance sector, so I don't know if this is true or not, but someone did mention to me once that they were struggling to get insurance for repetitive tasks that weren't being automated, because they're likely to result in injury. So if you're doing the same thing, heavy lifting, time and time again, and if you're not seen to be, as an employer, looking to automate that physical activity because it's standard unit, the technology is available, that in some way you're being negligent, which, yes, if it isn't around now, it's not a giant leap to think that will be the insurance's view in the future.
Yeah, I've not heard it, but I see a lot of repetitive work still. Things as daft as, people put a pallet on the floor and somebody's got to lift something out of the pallet and put it onto a bench. And there's one company I work with, and that happens. They produce a certain type of machine, and 1,024 units have got to be placed into this main machine. And when I went in to just review something with them, it's like, what? And I know why you've got the 19-year-old guy doing that, because all the other guys in their 50s have given up. They don't want to be doing it because their back's gone.
Yeah. And
when I watched him do it, I said, right, take me through what you're doing. What's the easiest way to do it? Well, and we broke it down, and 5 hours later, I got one of the welders to make a trolley which was the right height for him. And you lift the part, a big pallet. There were heavy parts. You're lifting them up onto the pallet, right, or onto the trolley, right. You can wheel that trolley along as you're doing it, right. That's it. No more bending. You've still got to lift because you've got to place them in properly, but at least you're lifting at the same height and everything's sorted. So I think repetitive activities will be the one. But it doesn't have to be. We have this vision. We're busy trying to build humanoids, so robots that do exactly and have all the same interconnections that we have. That to me is kind of bonkers. We don't need all this dexterity to do all of the tasks in a factory. Some of those tasks are really sort of fixed, and we can get them fixed. And I think we'll learn that. We'll kind of go backwards a little bit and learn that. If I've got a tube that I've got to weld to a plate, and I've got to get a welder to go around it, great. I might be doing that manually now, and I might get a cobot in to do it, but very quickly I'll realize that actually I could put a welding arm on a Boss system, and I could get that done. And I don't need the cobot, and I didn't need the guy doing it, but that's what I started with years ago. So I think you will find cobots kind of lead us into some fixed solutions for people, and there'll be some better engineered solutions, and we release the cobot to do even more difficult stuff. We've got to go through an iteration.
I was just going to say, again, there's that theme around having the courage to try and the courage to iterate. Mark, what would be the one big thing that you want the listeners to take away from today's podcast? What would be your number one piece of advice?
The piece of advice I tend to start, and I've got to be honest, I've seen this practically all my career. Get a schedule. And a schedule is not a plan. So a schedule is, what are you going to do and who is going to do it? And it's really critical that you have that. It's right the way through your process, from picking molds out of the system, from getting work ready out of stores, right the way through to packaging something up. Who is going to do that activity? Too many parts of a process, kind of the manufacturing bit is often quite well defined as to how it moves through the business. Who is going to do it and when they're going to do it isn't. So every step from picking parts right the way through off the shelves, right the way through to packing and dispatch, who's going to do it and when are they going to do it? Because when you do the when bit, you suddenly find, I've given that guy four things to do at the same time. That ain't going to work. He's not capable of doing it. So get a schedule. That there are probably people who watch this who've met me who kind of go, he bangs on about the schedule, and it really does. I'll give you an example with an organization I did. They didn't schedule in the testing and commissioning of work. So they built some really complex pieces of kit, didn't build in the commissioning and testing of work. Commissioning and testing all had to happen in the last week of a month. So all the production guys have been busy making stuff, all hit commissioning and testing. They got fed up over the years of doing overtime and things, so they'd kind of given up. The business typically would get about £3 million a month out of it when we arrived. Within 6 weeks, we got it to 4 million a month going out. And that was by scheduling what the guys in commissioning and testing were going to do. No extra people, no extra work, no faffing around, just right, we need to sort this out because you haven't organised that. And these guys are under pressure and they've actually given up on you. They don't put the extra hours in because they're fed up of it. And it was like one of those things of, how have you done that? Why have we got no more people? We're getting, a third more work out, a third more revenue into the business, not a third more revenue in without any more additional labour cost. What have you done? I've just organised it better. And I see that all the time. Schedules to me are the lifeblood of a business. Once you've got that, then have I got time to do training? Have I got time to do work on this? And sometimes you haven't. I see this thing in Lean where people say, you've got to stop to do improvement. If I've got a schedule in front of me that says everywhere's full and it's busy and I've got to hit these for customers, I'm going to stick with the process I know, even if I think it's clunky. I'll find the time in a few weeks to be able to go back and review it and do some testing. But I haven't got time to stop what I know works and try something new in case it goes wrong. If I'm full, if my schedule's full. But you'll be amazed how many things you find when you start scheduling a factory properly and understanding what's going through. And look, that's big organizations as well. I could bore you with all kinds of stories of where that scheduling's gone wrong in big organizations because they didn't understand how we operated.
There you are, folks. Sometimes it's the easiest of activities that make the biggest impact. Mark, where can people reach out to you, interact with you, follow you? Where's the best place to connect?
The best place is on LinkedIn. I'm on there fairly regularly. I try and post about 4 times a week. It's not every day, but 3-4 times a week. And I'll share stuff about it's factory management. I've realized that there aren't, the one thing that I've learned is how to run factories and how to, that was what I was trained in. And that's what I've done for a long time, as well as improvement. When I started, I didn't have an improvement team. I could go and ring up and ask to come down and run some training. I had to run it myself. I had to talk to people. We had to try stuff, so I've learned how to do improvement as a factory manager, but I've also, I've gone in at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, turn the circuit breakers on, warm the factory up, got orders sorted, been there, done, I think my record was a 22-hour shift when a machine went down, and we knew how to fix it, but it was like, can't leave this with anybody else because and just know this will go wrong if we do this, because it's an engineering thing. So I've been through I've done all those daft things and stupid things that you do, and I had a manager who used to call it, it's like the opening of a week is taking off on a plane, and the close of the week is bringing that plane into land. So I've had to bring that plane into land, make sure we were at the right location. We had all the right passengers on board. We had all the logs recorded of where we'd been and how much fuel we'd used and everything. So bringing it into land is the sort of Friday afternoon activity. So I try and write about what goes on in factory management as well as improvement, how you can sort of bring the two in. So yeah, LinkedIn's the best place for me.
And I can vouch that Mark's content is excellent, well worth a follow. Mark, listen, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. Look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for tuning into The Digital Manufacturer. We hope that today's conversation has provided some food for thought or sparked new ideas that will help you on your digital journey. To learn more about any of these topics discussed in the episode, head over to our website www.rubiktech.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on your favourite podcast platform to help others join in the digital manufacturing movement. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a future episode. The Digital Manufacturer is brought to you by Rubik, where we're not just talking about the future, we're making it happen. On behalf of everyone at Rubik, thank you for listening.